Hey, good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Gadi Schwartz coming to you from Los Angeles. And here are the stories we're watching tonight, starting with Ron DeSantis trying to tap into the full power of Twitter to enter the presidential race.
I'm Ron DeSantis, and I'm running for president to lead our great American comeback.
And a Florida governor announcing his candidacy in a Twitter space hosted by Elon Musk. What this could mean for the 2024 race and the relationship between big tech and politics. And whales gone wild. Scientists think orcas are sinking ships in Europe, and the behavior is starting to spread. The question is why? Wildlife expert Jeff Corwin will be here with more.
I can't believe we got hit by a whale. That was mostly what went through my head.
So it's official. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is in fact running for president in 2024, and he announced it in a way that we haven't seen before. First, by releasing this campaign ad on Twitter, talking about our great American comeback.
Truth must be our foundation, and common sense can no longer be an uncommon virtue. In Florida, we proved that it can be done. We chose facts over fear, education over indoctrination, law and order over rioting and disorder. We held the line when freedom hung in the balance. I'm Ron DeSantis, and I'm running for president to lead our great American comeback.
And DeSantis then went on to have a conversation with Twitter CEO Elon Musk. That whole talk went on for about 90 minutes after the platform crashed a bunch of times. It literally just wrapped up not too long ago. And here's what DeSantis said about why he chose to make his announcement on Twitter.
What made you want to kind of take the chance of doing it this way as opposed to just doing it on cable news or the usual way?
Well, when COVID hit, I had to make decisions about, do you go with the crowd or do you look at the data yourself and cut against the grain? And I chose to do the latter. I think what was done with Twitter is really significant for the future of our country.
And NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us now from Miami, Florida. Gabe, not the usual stuff we see with the presidential announcement, right? So no rally, no crowd, no video, just a Twitter Spaces conversation and a whole bunch of glitches and technical difficulties to start off there. What's the response been like on the ground in Florida?
Well, Gadi, the Trump campaign is having a field day right now. Just a short time ago, a Trump advisor said that Governor DeSantis is just not ready to be president, saying, quote, "This is an embarrassment." Another Trump campaign official said this was a complete failure to launch. Another one saying this is a Ron disaster. It is going on and on, Gadi, and they're really piling on these technical glitches. But the event did finally get underway. Governor DeSantis making his pitch to voters, but as you said, in a very unconventional way, audio only. And the DeSantis campaign right now is trying to spin this as saying that it means that his candidacy has a lot of strength behind it. There was so much interest. There were so many people on Twitter Spaces that it, quote, broke the internet. That's according to the DeSantis campaign. Got it.
How about voters? How are they responding to this Trump versus DeSantis competition so far?
Well, certainly. It's two men who live in Florida, and really the battle for the future of the Republican Party is heading right through this state. And we've been speaking with voters here on the ground, and you have many Trump supporters who support Governor DeSantis' policies, just they wish that he would stay as governor for another term and stay here in Florida, and they're sticking behind former President Trump. When you also talk to the DeSantis supporters, they just feel it's time to move on from former President Trump, and they really stress that they want to see Governor DeSantis' policies spread nationwide because they argue they've been so successful in Florida. Take a listen to some of the conversations we've had with some of those GOP primary voters here in Miami. Gadi.
I believe President Trump is the man that can bring us across the finish line. I believe Governor DeSantis has done a phenomenal job with the state of Florida, but I selfishly would like to keep him here a little while longer.
I wish it would only be Trump and DeSantis, because I honestly think DeSantis would win.
And of course, Gadi, these two men were allies until not so long ago. It was after Governor DeSantis won re-election by a landslide that former President Trump has really been going after him relentlessly. It will be interesting to see in the coming weeks whether Governor DeSantis, now that he's officially declared his run for presidency, whether he returns fire. Gadi.
Gabe Gutierrez, thanks so much. Now back to this whole unconventional thing. This is definitely the first time we've seen a social media CEO personally lend a massive platform to a politician to announce something that we all knew was coming. But at the heart of this is something that we have seen before, a politician using the medium as the message. It's something America saw way back in the 1950s when TV was first used for political ads. If you remember I Like Ike, take a look.
You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike. For president, hang out the banner and beat the drum. We'll take Ike to Washington.
All right, so beyond that tune, that was revolutionary. That was images and video edited by a campaign exactly how they wanted and broadcast directly to Americans. Then in the 1952 election, it was the first time that presidential candidates turned to television to communicate their message to voters.
Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we can have peace with honor, reasonable security with national solvency. I believe in the future of the United States of America.
And then everything changed. The idea of reaching voters through television dominated the next decade. Televised debates, for example, would become a tradition after the first one in 1960.
The candidates need no introduction. The Republican candidate, Vice President Richard M. Nixon, and the Democratic candidate, Senator John F. Kennedy.
And that was just the beginning. In more recent times, starting with a relatively unknown junior senator from Illinois, all the way to now, you didn't have a political campaign unless it was in some form on social media.
I stand before you today to announce my candidacy for President of the United States of America.
So I'm hitting the road to earn your vote because it's your time, and I hope you'll join me on this journey.
I am officially running for President of the United States.
So a lot of that happening on traditional media, but then a lot of the fights happening on social media. Joining us now to talk about what this all says for the future of campaigning is NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard and CNBC contributor and reporter at the Wall Street Journal, Tim Higgins. He's also the author of Power Play, Tesla, Elon Musk, and the Bet of the Century. Now, guys, this is an unusual way to announce this presidential campaign. Do you think this is a play at trying to court Musk's massive following? Is this a challenge to Trump on his old Twitter turf, or is there something more at play? Vaughn?
Well, it's kind of like a traditional town hall event, if you may, Gadi, except it's a little bit easier to keep protesters and folks who may cause chaos at said town hall in a real-life platform at bay. Because on this Twitter Spaces town hall of sorts with a couple 100,000, it was Elon Musk and those running Twitter who were able to choose who had access to unmute their buttons to ask Ron DeSantis the questions here. And that's where at the end of this about an hour-long back and forth with DeSantis, Elon Musk opened up and said that other presidential candidates were welcome to take part in a similar exercise, but there was sort of a post-game spaces that was going on, and some commentators, once Ron DeSantis had left the chat, were commenting that it was too filtered, and they felt like there was not an opportunity to ask real direct questions of DeSantis. Instead, it was just allies of him. So some frustration, and that is part of this, is when you kind of have a curated internet platform, it is one that is going to ultimately be likely more favorable to said presidential candidate, in this case, Ron DeSantis.
And Tim, when you saw that tweet that happened after that Twitter Spaces where he says all presidential candidates are welcome on Twitter, what went through your mind?
Well, two things Elon is trying to do here. He's trying to flex his new muscle of influence that he has by acquiring Twitter, be perhaps a ringmaster in the 2024 cycle, and B, this was really supposed to be, in a lot of ways, his kind of coming out to show just the power of Twitter out there for that cycle. As he kind of moves forward as a company, he needs to bring people in. He needs to keep engagement going as he tries to reinvent the company. He has lots of ideas, but right now, one of the most important things he can do is keep the platform relevant, keep it part of the conversation. And so if you think of it that way, tonight was a little bit of a disaster. 20 minutes of huge technical issues at a point in time when it was at center stage after a lot of hype. And, it'll be interesting to see kind of how the other presidential candidates and hopefuls will respond in the future here. Will they trust the platform? Will they want to get involved in something that could potentially be very messy? Or is it something that is seen as authentic to a lot of people who conduct their daily political life in these worlds, in the kind of the Twitter primary? And if you're in the Republican Party, you're going to be fighting for that against Donald Trump.
And Tim, it's interesting you say that. I'm in a few different text chains. Some of them are saying that this was a big success, and they're sending me tweets showing that it's a big success. Others are sending me tweets that say that this is an abject failure. The common denominator in all of them is their tweets. The tweets are being used as a case in point here. Is this on the Twitter side and the Elon Musk side? Is this one of those things where there's no such thing as bad publicity because it's all publicity for Twitter?
Well, yes and no. I mean, he doesn't want it to be a platform that is just kind of amateur hour. There's obviously work needs to go into the system to make sure it can come back to kind of its reliability. These numbers, while large, aren't really that big in the grand scheme of things of the people watching it. So there's clearly a lot to fix there. For the presidential candidate, for the governor, I think time will tell. The free media here that he's getting off of it, how does it break through in the next few days? Is he get blamed or does Elon get blamed?
And Vaughn, in some ways, this is funny because we were just talking about the advent of television over print and radio, then social media. But Spaces is kind of a throwback to like radio chat, old school spoken word. Do you think that that's going to resonate with voters in a way that maybe podcasts do and video doesn't?
Right. I think that's kind of the question. And I think, though, the heart of it is the moderator of this conversation, Elon Musk, the guy in the community who you want to be having the microphone to be the one sort of delegating the questions and having sort of those conversations. Because Elon Musk just last year was called a BS artist by Donald Trump. This is somebody who has become quite political himself. The left does not view him as somebody who is a fair arbiter. He says that he is all about free speech, yet they feel like on Twitter there are attached, community statements that are made to posts that they feel are politically motivated, due in part to Elon Musk's own political beliefs. But this is the other hard part here is that Elon Musk, despite buying Twitter for $44 billion, is going to have to still compete with streaming platforms, with old school cable television. If Ron DeSantis tonight had decided in the 6 p.m. hour to have done a traditional campaign rally or a town hall with cameras rolling, he would have had millions of viewers between cable television and streaming platforms. Whereas at its peak, there was about 600,000 folks who were listening in on Twitter Spaces. So really, Elon Musk has a heavy load ahead of him to really try to make the case that this is the future, because that 26 minutes, that was a notable 26 minutes that folks were waiting for that to get going.
Vaughn Hilliard and Tim Higgins, thank you both. Fascinating conversation, and I'm sure one of many to come. Thanks so much for joining us. Hey there, welcome back. Let's take a look at some other headlines that we're watching tonight. The man charged with ramming a U-Haul truck into a barrier near the White House was in court today. His name is Sai Kandula, and prosecutors asked the judge to keep him in jail until a trial. Kandula reportedly said he was on a mission to kill President Biden and admired Nazis. He'll be back in court next week. And a grand jury just indicted convicted murderer Alec Murdaugh with federal charges. The former lawyer now faces 22 financial fraud-related counts, including conspiracy to cheat insurance carriers and his former housekeeper's estate after her death in 2018. Murdaugh is currently serving a life sentence for murdering his wife and son. And a man was arrested for trespassing near a Virginia preschool, and police found an AK-47 in his car. He told police he was headed to the CIA, which is about a mile away. And rapper Fetty Wap was sentenced to 6 years in prison for drug trafficking. The drugs included heroin and fentanyl. He apologized in court saying, "I hurt my community, people who look up to me, my family, and myself." And the FTC is looking into whether top baby formula makers colluded over state contracts. The Wall Street Journal reports the agency is investigating whether the company coordinated and that coordination also impacted sales. And with all this political back and forth between the Capitol Hill and the White House about the debt ceiling, it is easy to lose sight that millions of Americans stand to face crushing consequences if D.C. doesn't figure it out soon. By some estimates, 6 million jobs could be lost. The unemployment rate could nearly double. If you've got a 401k, you could lose tens of thousands of dollars. And new 30-year mortgages could cost a whole lot more. And there's also a lot of veterans that are worried right now that they're not going to get their benefits. With Memorial Day right around the corner, our very own Shaq Brewster caught up with some vets and their families at the Quad Cities Veterans Outreach Center in Davenport, Iowa. He joins us now. Shaq, how could veteran benefits be at risk here?
Gadi, we're looking at anything from pensions, disability benefits, assistance for tuition and medicine, all of the programs and assistance that the federal government offers, that could be at risk if there is no deal by that June 1st date. Let me break it down a little bit, because the Treasury Secretary does not know and has not specified what programs would be funded and what things would get delayed payments, or what payments would be delayed if the negotiators don't come up with a deal in the next couple of days. But what we do know is that the federal government has about a $12 billion bill to help fund veteran benefits. That is on the same day that the Treasury Secretary says the government is going to run out of money. So that's why veterans are watching this with extreme concern, because this is something they rely on. Some people working paycheck to paycheck, or living paycheck to paycheck, relying on that that money in assistance for their next meal, for the mortgage payment. I want you to listen to what some veterans told me about how they're viewing this, and not only how they're watching the debate, but if any of those payments are delayed, what impact it could have on them.
And real quick, Shaq, when you're talking to these veterans, who do they blame for the potential loss of benefits? Is it Republicans in Congress, or is it the president?
You know, it's just like they just say Washington. It's the back and forth in Washington that they blame. You know, some people understand the nuances and the politics of it. They understand what Speaker McCarthy wants. They understand what the president wants and what his negotiating position is. But one veteran told me he feels like a pawn in this entire fight. He doesn't like that his livelihood depends on whether Democrats or Republicans can form an agreement here. So there's a lot of that frustration that you're hearing, and a lot of just frustration over the fact that politicians in Washington have this much power over their lives. They know that this will determine what meal they will have. It will determine what assistance they can get. We were at a Veterans Outreach Center earlier today, which already supports veterans by providing food, providing haircuts, providing assistance for them. And the Veteran Outreach Center said that this is a process, a potential that they're planning for right now, that they may have to scale up their efforts to support veterans if a deal is not reached. Again, we don't know what will happen if a deal isn't reached. The Treasury Secretary has not specified it, but the fact that there is uncertainty for these veterans over when they'll receive their next payment, how they will live their lives, that is a problem, especially, as you mentioned earlier, as we're heading into Memorial Day, when we're honoring veterans and honoring those who lost their lives to protect our country.
Shaq Brewster, thanks so much. With the advancement of technology, new medical miracles are being made every single day, and our next story proves it. Ertjan Ozcom is one of the many people who has a spinal cord injury. A motorcycle crash 12 years ago left him paralyzed from the waist down, but thanks to new experimental brain and spine implants, he has relearned to walk.
The most surprising thing, I think, happened after 2 days. Within 5 to 10 minutes, I could control my hips. The brain implant picked up what I was doing with my hips, so that was like the best outcome, I think, for everyone.
And joining us now is NBC News medical fellow Dr. Akshay Syal. Dr. Syal, this seems like a whole nother level. How exactly does a double implant like this work?
Yeah, I mean, it almost seems like science fiction, and so it's a little complicated. So I'll break it down here, and we'll see if we can figure this out. So there's a part in the brain, Gadi. There's a part in the backpack that the user wears, and then there's a part in the spinal cord. So it does require surgery to place an implant in the brain and in the spinal cord. But what's really cool here is it's for the first time. It's as the patient is so much as thinking about walking, that implant in the brain sends a signal to the backpack, which uses AI to send a signal to the spinal cord, which can then move the muscles, just like you and I would think to move our leg. That you see he's able to move his leg, and that's really where the breakthrough happens, Gadi. It's artificial intelligence able to decode those thoughts in the brain, making it really, really easy and natural.
All happening in real time and all of it happening in a backpack. And this is just the first generation of this, right? So I guess looking forward into the future, how much mobility could someone gain with this, and how small could these things get?
Yeah, so that's really the big question. This is a proof of concept study, meaning that he's the only patient really that they've tried this on. And so as they look to go forward, they're going to focus on, can we make patients who have absolutely no function of their legs, can we make them walk again? And can we make this smaller and something that patients would actually want to use? Because this isn't the first device that has enabled movement for people who are paralyzed. The problem, Gadi, is that those devices often sit in the closets of people who have them because they're so clunky and they're so big, and they don't have that artificial intelligence capability to make it a really, really natural experiment. So going forward, there are trials that are going to be happening in the next 12 to 18 months, and they're hoping to get this commercialized within just 4 to 7 years, Gadi.
Once again, finding hope in the future. Dr. Syal, thanks so much for joining us.
Anytime.
And coming up, orca whales that are attacking and sinking boats. It sounds crazy, right? Well, the even crazier part is that they might be teaching other whales how to do it too. But first, you got to see this. A pair of very cute little sloth cubs made their debut this week at the Philadelphia Zoo. Video shared by the zoo shows the cubs exploring their outdoor habitat with mom Kayla close by. The zoo is currently home to only 4 of those rare species, but it seems like they did the best and they did the impossible, being the second successful sloth bear birth at the zoo in the last 4 years. The zoo is now asking for the public's help in naming those cubs. The options are 2 Philly-centric name pairs, Kelsey and Harper, or Halls and Oates. What do you guys think? We'll be right back. Hey there, Steak. Thanks for sticking with us. Let's get you caught up real fast in 30 seconds. Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis has officially jumped into the presidential race. He filed the paperwork this afternoon, then publicly made the announcement on Twitter in a conversation with Elon Musk. And superstar singer Tina Turner has died at the age of 83. She was known for those massive hits like Proud Mary and later What's Love Got to Do with It. She is regarded as one of the greatest voices of the 20th century. And the government is scheduled to pay $12 billion in veteran benefits on June 1st, but if the debt ceiling hasn't been lifted by then, some vets might be forced to sacrifice a little bit more for the country. While a lot of stores are stocking their shelves with Pride merchandise ahead of Pride Month, Target says it is removing some merch because their employees are getting threatened. The retail giant released its Pride celebration line earlier this month, but it led some customers to boycott the company. NBC's Gary Grumbach has more.
Honestly, Target, what is going on? This is pretty disgusting.
Target taking heat on social media and in its stores over some of its LGBTQ plus merchandise.
This right here. These are baby clothes. Why are there Pride baby onesies?
Days before Pride Month begins, the retailer is taking down some of its Pride merchandise after saying their employees are facing threats. In a statement, a Target spokesperson telling NBC News, quote, "Given these volatile circumstances, we are making adjustments to our plans, including removing items that have been at the center of the most significant confrontational behavior." Target didn't specify what clothing they're removing from their stores, but swimsuits labeled tuck-friendly have sparked anger from some on the right. Those are bathing suits that allow trans women who have not had gender-affirming operations to conceal their private parts. But experts say the sale of these bathing suits is being taken out of context.
They're painting these bathing suits as being targeted specifically to children, which kind of furthers this false narrative that trans people are preying on children in some way or trying to, quote unquote, indoctrinate them.
And Target is not the first company to face retaliation after embracing the transgender community. Anheuser-Busch is seeing a 6th straight week of declining sales, according to Nielsen IQ data, after partnering with a trans activist.
I got some Bud Lights for us. So I think the question is really, are these companies willing to, cater to LGBTQ people or have LGBTQ specific marketing campaigns and kind of stick or ride out what the consequences of that could be because of this larger national conversation and the quote unquote culture war that we're seeing related to it.
Some Target shoppers befuddled by the backlash.
It's 2023 and I feel like people should just learn how to accept how other people are.
It astounds me that the world is made up of people who are so afraid.
Others understanding Target's move to keep their employees safe.
I think they should do what's best for the employees since they're there and they're the ones actually getting harassed. And the LGBTQ community should be open to that and respect it.
The aisles of your local department store now on the front lines of the fight over LGBT rights.
Today, those were bells tolling in Uvalde, Texas, exactly 1 year since the deadly mass shooting at Robb Elementary. The community came together to mourn the 19 children and 2 teachers killed by a teen with an assault rifle. They released 21 butterflies, 1 for each victim. But there are still questions about why the police took over an hour to try to stop that shooter. And since that day, families and political leaders have called for accountability and for change. Today, President Biden pressed Congress to act.
Can't end this epidemic until Congress pass some common sense gun safety laws that keep weapons of war off our streets and out of the hands of dangerous people.
Joining us now from Uvalde is NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas. Guad, how are people dealing with this difficult day there?
Gadi, well, it's a year since this tragedy happened, and it's a day of healing. There's a lot of thoughts and emotions going through people's minds, right? But I think today, Uvalde has joined for all of these events. You just showed some images of what happened earlier today, the butterfly release and the bells at the local church. In fact, right now, there's a candlelight vigil about to begin just down the road from where we are in the town square. So it's a day of unity and healing for people that have been looking for closure. But they haven't really found it because there is a large feeling of frustration here when it comes to that investigation. We've been talking to the family members of the victims, the friends and members of the community since last year after this tragedy happened. And it's been complicated. They've seen a lack of transparency from law enforcement from the beginning. If you remember when state authorities had shared information about what had happened in that police response and then walked back on that information. And then moving forward, people here have been waiting for the investigation into law enforcement's reaction. Why did it take over an hour for officers to confront the killer? What happened with those 911 calls and the chain of command and all of these details? So the conversations we've had with members of the community will usually get to a point where they say, we want more transparency. We want someone to be accountable for what's happened, but they have to wait because they have not been able to get that closure as they wait for this investigation that is still ongoing. So that's one thing. Aside from that, they are joined together today on this 1 year, since the shooting took place. But there still is that feeling where they just can't be happy without knowing who is responsible for this. Tom Llamas, our colleague, spoke to a lot of the relatives from some of the victims that lost their life. And this is what one of the victims said about her feelings towards her political appointees or the government, how she feels public officials have responded to this.
Our political leaders, our government's going to take care of us. That's going to be a wake-up call. And I think that's what's crushing us. It's crushing me to learn about how the government really works and how it benefits them. And we're just their pawns.
And that resonates with a lot of the words we've heard from other family members of the victims. Now, the mayor spoke earlier this week and told the media that city officials here have also been kept out of that investigation. And the city is also frustrated with how long it's been taken. Meanwhile, the district attorney said they don't have a timeline and they are still working. So it's a waiting game for the families here and the members of the community to find this closure after they finally get the results of that investigation, Gadi.
And beyond that investigation, when you hear those families share those sentiments and they call for change, it's now been a year since the tragedy. Has anything changed at the State House?
Well, when you get to gun law reform, then it gets even more complicated, Gadi. So there's been legislation that has been proposed at a federal level and obviously at the state level here in Texas. Now, people have different ideas when it comes to gun control here in Texas and also in Uvalde. Governor Greg Abbott has been questioned about this, and he will usually shift the conversation towards the issue of mental health. He will always go to mental health, but avoid discussing gun law reform. He was reelected, so he has the support of Texans, and a lot of people in Uvalde still support the governor. Now, people here that own guns and those that don't own guns will have different opinions about how to move forward, but what I can say to you is that a lot of people have discussed the idea of having a change in the law that allows 18-year-olds to own these semi-automatic weapons like the one that was used in the shooting. A lot of people would like the age to be changed from 18 to 21. There was legislation in the Texas State Legislature proposed. It looked like it was promising, but then that got stalled. So it's been quite difficult. Here's State Senator Roland Gutierrez, who was speaking about the state's response.
You don't heal from this. You don't get over this. Every one of those families has been devastated. They've been devastated by a legislature in Texas that has done absolutely nothing.
So at a state level, we have not seen the change that a lot of the family members of the victims have been asking for. So it's going to be a waiting game to see if anything does change. And of course, back to that investigation as they all join today and really do focus on the healing a year after this tragedy took place. Gadi.
Quad Venegas, an important day to remember there. Thanks so much. And orcas, or killer whales, have been doing something really weird over the past few years. They are attacking and even sometimes sinking boats. And the most recent incident happened about 3 weeks ago. This was off the coast of Spain, where 3 orcas hit a sailing yacht. They sunk it, and researchers don't really know why this is happening, but there's some speculation that this could be, and get this, a series of coordinated attacks. It sounds so bizarre when you hear it. But joining us now is Jeff Corwin, a biologist and host of Ocean Treks with Jeff Corwin. Jeff, so 15 of these incidents between orcas and boats off the Iberian coast in 2020, is that a lot? How uncommon is it for orcas to come across and interact with boats this way?
Gadi, I'd say this is some pretty extraordinary orca behavior. These are incredibly intelligent creatures. They learn, they adapt, they discover, and they change their behaviors. They also have all the emotions that human beings would have. They have joy, they have fear, they have malevolence. They're incredibly complex social creatures. And in this case, Gadi, is what we're seeing is a very novel learned behavior. But the question is, why are they attacking these ships, these sailing vessels?
And I mean, when you start thinking about what's going on, it almost paints this picture of, at some point, some orca or the orcas decided that this could have been a threat, and then they had to communicate. It's either the same pod or they had to communicate that with other orcas for this to be going on in different places. Is there a chance that this is all the same pod, the same orcas, or does it seem like it's happening with orcas that may be outside of a family unit?
Well, this is likely what we call a residential pod, a residential extended family group. And this is a behavior, just like human beings, is through trial and error. It's through learning and through discovery. And what is likely is one orca is teaching another orca, likely a mother teaching its calf, this behavior. Now, there's 2 theories to why this is happening. One theory is that it's out of being rambunctiousness, playful behavior. Of course, they're very powerful, and there can be devastating consequences to that playful behavior. But the other is that it's because of a traumatic event. There's one female orca in particular, and one theory is that maybe she was injured. She had this traumatic event, and now she takes a sailboat as a threat, and she's taught this defensive, then offensive behavior to other members of her pod.
Yeah, and it's crazy because orcas, I mean, I grew up watching Free Willy, so it's very easy to anthropomorphize what's happening with a whale in the ocean and their interaction with humans. You are such an incredible resource when it comes to whales. I know that there's some video that you have of a North Atlantic right whale. If we could play that, we'd love to see what we're looking at here.
Absolutely, Gadi. This is so important that we all take witness of this because we may be the last generation to see this creature before our eyes right now. This is the North Atlantic right whale. This is footage from IFAW, the International Fund for Animal Welfare. They're on the front lines with the team of folks trying to save these whales. Right now, Gadi, we only have about 340 surviving right whales. This year, the population is about to collapse, flip to what could be extinction because they only produced 11 living calves. They're on the brink of disappearing. You can see right now in that footage, Gadi, one of the reasons why they're disappearing. It's ghost nets. They get entangled in fishing line, and they suffer tremendously. They also get hit by ships when they wander and migrate into shipping lanes. So those factors, along with climate change, is driving this species to the brink of extinction, and we may lose it within our lifetimes.
11 offspring for possibly the entire species. That is a terrifying thought. Thank you so much for bringing us those images. Jeff Corwin, thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you.
We've got much more ahead, including a powerful typhoon in Guam. The storm knocked out power to most of the island and is not done yet. That story is coming up next when we check out news around the world, so stay tuned. Hey there, welcome back. Let's take you around the world real quick in 80 seconds. Now, the Popocatépetl volcano just outside of Mexico City has millions of Mexicans on alert tonight. The volcano has been active, spewing ash, rocks, and fumes every day for nearly a week. And scientists are saying that it is impossible to tell how long this activity is going to last, but they say that they are confident they're going to have enough of a warning to evacuate millions in the area if things take a turn for the worse. And former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is facing new allegations that he broke more coronavirus rules between June of 2020 and May of 2021. The Metropolitan Police say they are looking into, quote, potential breaches of the country's health protections. Johnson was already fined last year for breaking COVID rules. And police in Germany are cracking down on a climate activist group known as the Last Generation. That's the group that's known for attacking art and gluing themselves to roads to raise awareness. Now, Munich prosecutors are investigating them for organizing a fundraiser to finance criminal activities. And today, police raided 15 properties linked to the group, seizing bank accounts and other assets. And China is bracing for yet another COVID wave from a new variant called XBB. And authorities there are rushing to push out vaccines. They expect the wave to peak in June, which could infect as many as 65 million people a week. And that would make it the largest wave since the country dismantled its zero COVID policy last winter. And a powerful typhoon has smashed into Guam, battering the island with winds of over 140 miles per hour. It hit the island as a Category 4 storm, leaving much of the U.S. Pacific territory without power. NBC News foreign correspondent Aaron McLaughlin has more on what's next for the people facing this storm.
Overnight in Guam, a massive typhoon pounding the island. Winds up to 140 miles per hour, tossing a pickup truck around like a toy, taking out chunks of the side of this resort. What the? And ripping through a hotel lobby. Guest Luis Zamora didn't sleep at all last night.
As you can see, we have a lot of damage.
He shows us a room too dangerous to stay in.
The rooms are unusable. As you can see, the building is moving back and forth.
Guests hunkering down in flooded hallways, water seeping through the ceiling. Officials say it's even more dangerous out on the road.
Too many flying debris Tree tops are coming down, palm fronds, coconuts.
Typhoon Warr is equivalent to a Category 4 hurricane, the strongest to pass this close to the U.S. territory in more than 20 years.
We are at the crosshairs of Typhoon Warr. Take action now.
The Navy is sending in the USS Nimitz carrier strike group to deal with the aftermath. Tonight, most of the island is without power, and officials say they're only just beginning to survey the damage. Aaron McLaughlin, NBC News.
And before we go, you know what time it is. We've got Future of Everything and my favorite subject. If aliens contacted us here on Earth, would we be able to figure out what the heck they're trying to say? Well, scientists are doing a practice run, so we're better prepared. We'll explain next, so stay tuned. And tonight's Future of Everything starts with Meta. The Facebook and Instagram parent company is starting its latest rounds of layoffs. And these are focusing mainly on employees of Meta's business groups compared to last month's layoffs, which affected employees on the technical side. About 10,000 workers who are going to lose their jobs in the latest round of cuts. And Meta is also part of a new lawsuit brought by a public school system in Maryland. Prince George's County Public Schools blame social media platforms like Facebook and TikTok for contributing to a mental health crisis among students. And our headlines end in space. Communicating with aliens is something we've only seen in movies, or so we thought.
That's a proper introduction.
I mean, that's a handshake. Well, today, a team of scientists simulated an alien signal coming from a spacecraft currently orbiting Mars. And the idea is to see if we've got the ability to decode a future sign from space. Now, the team is asking scientists around the world to take a stab at trying to successfully decode that signal. TBD on if it actually works. And to celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, we have been sharing stories about the accomplishments of the AAPI community. Today, we're going to look at the groundbreaking achievements of Asian American athletes who have represented our country on the field, on the court, and on the ice. NBC's Vicky Nguyen has more.
Olympians Suni Lee and Nathan Chen, the NFL's Tua Tagovailoa. Of course, there's golf great
Welcome back, Big Cat!
Tiger Woods, tennis star Michael Chang. Before Kristi Yamaguchi, there was Tiffany Chin, the first Asian American skater to represent the U.S. at the Winter Olympics. On the hardwood, Jeremy Lin took the country by storm with Linsanity, NFL quarterback and son of a Filipino immigrant, Roman Gabriel. Asian American standouts in professional sports where few others share their history or heritage. Asian Americans are the fastest growing racial or ethnic group in the U.S., according to the Pew Research Center, comprising 6.2% of the population in the U.S. But Asian Americans make up about 3% of professional athletes, the lowest of the major demographics.
I was called the N-word, I was called the chink, Bruce Leroy, Blackanese.
Heinz Ward was born in South Korea. His mother, Kim Young-hee, is Korean, his dad, Black. The family eventually moved to Atlanta, where Ward excelled in sports. But off the field, he struggled with belonging.
The Korean kids didn't want to hang out with me because I had a black father. The white kids didn't want to hang out with me because I was both black and Korean.
Ward went on to play football at the University of Georgia, then spent 14 years in the NFL with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He played in 3 Super Bowls, won 2, and was the Super Bowl MVP in 2006. That year, he spoke with NBC's Lester Holt.
Some of those kids that used to call you Jackie Chan and make all his names.
Now they love me.
Today, Ward is the head coach of the XFL San Antonio Brahmas. He embraces his ethnicity and his mother.
I'm kind of glad I went through some adversity that I went through early on in my life. My mom knows that, there's nothing I wouldn't do for my mom.
Ward remains the only Super Bowl MVP of Asian descent. His path in finding success and leaning into his racial identity, an experience shared by speed skating gold medalist Apollo Ono.
My father poured everything into me, and he fused this Americana culture with his Japanese heritage, and that was my upbringing. It absolutely was a fundamental piece of just being dedicated and being obsessed around what I did.
And Chloe Kim, 2-time gold medal winner on the halfpipe.
Really feels like we're in this together and we're fighting the same fight, and it's really important and empowering at the same time.
Olympic ice dancers Alex and Maya Shibutani are 2-time Olympic bronze medalists and 3-time world champs.
How have you tried to address discrimination and racism through your sport and through how you live your lives?
I think it was really challenging for us when we were within the system of sports because there is a certain power structure. But I think as we've taken the time to reflect, we know that it's our actions and the ripple effect has a real impact.
What would be your message to young people who are watching and want to get involved in a sport or a profession where they don't see anyone who really looks like them?
It's difficult to distill singular advice because everyone's experience is so different. My advice would be to never let anyone feel that being different is a bad thing.
With their new children's book, Amazing Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders Who Inspire Us All, the Shibutanis share profiles of current and historic figures that help everyone understand the contributions of the AAPI community.
We know that the work that we're doing will have a longer lasting effect than almost anything we could do on the ice.
Vicki Nguyen, NBC News.
Always a good reminder to see how much progress society is making, right? That does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.